I want you to like talk, and we'll just have this interactive conversation as much as we can, um, given the nature of this subject. Okay, so the first thing that people get wrong in the exam is, I call it the three apples: application, application, application. And application is really the key to passing SBL, right? So if you want to pass SBL, really SBL is not a knowledge-based exam. So some students, they like memorize everything. They memorize all the theories, and it's not really about knowledge. The exam is really about application. It's about applying to the case study, applying to the question. So like a little tip for you when you're doing the exam is, if you're not mentioning the company every 5 minutes, then something is going wrong in your examination. You must always relate back to the case. If you write your answer, a paragraph in the exam, and you haven't mentioned the case, something is wrong in your answer. It must be all about application. So what some candidates do, and hopefully nobody here is in that position, a lot of people like rote learn big chunks of the syllabus, and then they try to like just copy and paste in the examination. So really, it's not knowledge. The examiner is not testing knowledge. The knowledge is not good enough to pass SBL. This is a professional exam. So what you must do is you must always apply the knowledge, right? Link it back to the case, make reference to the exhibits in the case. And that is the like most important thing you need to do for the SBL examination. You must link everything you do back to the case. So I'd be very careful in the exam about copying and pasting exhibits. So some students, they just copy bits out of the case study and then paste it into their answer. If you're just copying and pasting and doing nothing else, it's not going to get you any marks in the examination. Copy and paste does not get you any marks in the exam. Students still do it. It makes their question look longer, makes the answer look longer, but copy and paste without adding any value to it will not get you any marks in the examination. So copy and paste is an absolute no-no for me. You don't need to copy and paste anything in the examination, really. So what you should be doing is applying. If you just copy and paste, how can they give you any marks? So the examiner has said, the ACCA advice has said, if you copy and paste without any further explanation, you will not score any marks, even if the point is relevant. So copy and paste does not get you marks in the exam. So what gets you marks in the exam? Well, when we're doing the exam, I want to ask you a question, right? So when you've got your syllabus, the syllabus is all full of different models like suitability, acceptability, feasibility, and Lewin's change management. So let me ask you a question. How do we use models and frameworks in the SBL exam? And do we need to use models and frameworks in the SBL exam? Can you just tell me what you think the answer is to that question? Anybody got any idea how we use models and frameworks in the exam, especially if people took the exam last time? Yeah, so I think that's a good answer. So yeah, use it as the basis for formulating. Yeah, don't reference it. Yeah, so that's a good point. Dominic, well done. Models are good to frame the answer. Yeah, so basically you're correct. So when you're using the models are there really for you to provide a framework for ideas for doing your answer. You never mention the model name. You should not be mentioning the model name. You should never describe the model. They are there for you to generate ideas. So if you're using suitability, acceptability, and feasibility in the examination, it's really there to generate ideas. You don't need to reference it. It's just there for you to build your answer. It's just there to build your answer. Yeah, so it's a guideline to formulating your answer in the examination. So the thing that I want to impress to you on this in this seminar, and a lot of people don't understand this when they're doing their SBL exam, is when you're doing your SBL exam, it should be like you're writing a business document. It shouldn't be like you're writing an exam answer. So the idea of SBL is supposed to be practical. SBL is supposed to be a simulation of the real world, simulation of real life. So when you write your answer, writing a report, it should be as if you're writing a report to a senior manager. That's how you should kind of frame it in the examination. So the models are there to generate ideas. You will not get marks for anything like describing the models. If you describe the models, it's just wasting time. It's 0. So it's there to generate ideas. And so I'll just go back to that. You don't actually need to use any model to answer sometimes. So most questions, you can either choose to use the model or not. If you've got a good general knowledge, a good business knowledge, you can use that to write your answer. You don't always have to use a model. So if you're not using a model, do not panic. In the exam, you don't need to use it. Now, sometimes in the exam, you're going to be asked to do calculations. If you calculate something, you calculate a ratio, and you don't comment on the ratio, how many marks do you think you're going to receive for that in the examination? If you calculate, but you do not comment in the exam, how many marks do you think you're going to get? Just tell me in the chat how many marks you're going to think you will receive in the exam. Calculate your ratio. You got your calculator right. Calculate some ratios. So we've got a few ideas here, a few people interacting. 1 or 2 if you're lucky. Amaris says not many. Dominic says 1 or 2. Actually, the correct answer is 0. So if you calculate something in the examination, you calculate ratio and you don't comment, you will not get any marks for that calculation. You only get marks if calculation is followed by commentary. So whenever you're doing a calculation in the exam, what I want you to think about is, what does the numbers mean? Is it strong? Is it weak? Is it a problem for the company? What problem does it demonstrate? You must always follow any number you calculate. It must be followed by words afterwards. So you're not going to get any marks for calculating numbers purely in your answer and in your examination. So most questions in the exam, there are some exceptions, but most questions do not ask you to use a specific model. You can answer with or without a model generally. There are some exceptions. Some questions do point to a specific model, but generally you can answer with or without a model in the examination. So the models are there, but they're really there to help you. You don't have to reference them. You don't have to do them. The most important thing for you in the exam is to apply. Link to the case. So let me ask you a question in the exam, right? So if it's a 10-mark question in the exam, how many paragraphs do you need to write in the examination for a 10-mark question? 10 marks in the exam. How many paragraphs do you need to write in the exam? So Prakash says 5. Anybody else got any ideas? Prakash got 5. What does everybody else think? 5? Dominic says as many as it takes to get 10 points. Generally, what I want you to think about for the SBL exam is each paragraph you're targeting 2 marks per paragraph. So each paragraph you are targeting 2 marks per paragraph in the examination. So that's what you've got to try and achieve in the exam, 2 marks per paragraph. So if you're in the exam, 10-mark question, your target is going to be to achieve and write 5 paragraphs in the examination. So how do we get, and this is the important part, right? How do we get 2-mark paragraphs in the exam? So and this is where I think the person who got 48 marks, what you've got to be thinking about is your paragraph you write in the exam, is it worth 2 marks to the examiner, or is it worth 1? If you're getting a lot of 1-mark paragraphs, it might lead you to be a marginal candidate in the examination. It might lead to a marginal fail. So you're not getting enough depth into your paragraphs. You're not writing enough. So remember, when you're in SBL, the extra mark you get, the extra line or sentence, the extra 2 sentences can be a big difference to your mark. So a lot of students in the exam, their answers are too brief. Excuse me. So the first mark is for making your point, but then you've got to link back to the case, right? You've got to get that second mark. And the second mark is available for expanding on your point. So you've got to provide an example. That example must come from the exhibits. Occasionally, it can be a real life example. So if they're asking you about cybersecurity, you can give an example and then quote a company like that's using this cybersecurity system. If you're asked about big data, how to use big data in the exam, you can say, oh, well, this company is using big data in this way. And that's also a good extra mark in the examination. So always you've got to focus on, make your point, but then make your example and then say why it's important. So don't just give the example from the case, say why that example is relevant in this case. So I always tell my students, what should a paragraph look like in the exam? It should have a point. For the first two sentences, make your point. Then it should have an example, and then it should have a say why. Say why it's important. Say why it's relevant, why it's important. So when you're framing your answer, it's not you have to write down 10 points for a 10-mark question. What you need to do is to write down 5 points, and each point should be supported by an example and a say why. Okay, so that's good. Anybody got any question about the application part, about application in the exams? Anybody got any question about application in the exam? Okay, we're good, right? Let's move on. So when you're writing your answer, treat it as much as you can like a business document and not an exam answer is my tip, right? So if you're writing to the CEO, imagine that you're writing to the CEO as best you can under the pressure of time constraints. Avoid long introductions in the examination. Long introductions are not going to get you any marks in the exam. So whatever you do, don't have a big long introduction. It's not going to help you in your examination. Keep introduction as brief as possible. I would advise 1 sentence introduction for your answers. That's all you need. Don't make it long. It's not going to give you any marks.